My name is Harper. I'm 30 years old, and I've spent my entire life being the dependable one, the sister who shows up, the daughter who never complains, the woman who says yes, even when her heart whispers no. Growing up, I wasn't the golden child. That title belonged to my younger sister Sophie. She was the delicate one, the dreamer, the future bride my mother gushed over at every holiday dinner. I was the one who balanced our checkbooks, fixed the plumbing when Dad left, and paid for Sophie's college tuition without ever being asked. I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because I believed that family meant sacrifice, even if that sacrifice was rarely returned. I paid the mortgage once when my mom lost her job and didn't tell anyone. I bought Sophie her first car when she got accepted into NYU. I've covered medical bills, therapy sessions, and surprise expenses like it was my duty, because I thought love looked like giving, until I realized mine came with terms and conditions I never agreed to. Even when I was exhausted from 12-hour workdays, I still showed up to decorate Sophie's engagement party venue while she went to get her nails done. I poured my time, money, and energy into making her wedding perfect, believing it would finally bring us all together. My mom hugged me and said, "You've always been like a second mother to Sophie. I don't know what we'd do without you." At the time, I thought that was gratitude. I didn't realize it was a warning one that meant I'd always be the background character in my own life story. Still, I smiled through it. I paid the florist. I pre-ordered the bridesmaid robes. I negotiated a 10% discount on the honeymoon suite using my travel rewards. And when Sophie asked me to be her maid of honor, I nearly cried. I thought maybe finally I was being seen not just for what I gave, but for who I was. But I was wrong. And that truth didn't arrive gently. It came quietly in whispers behind closed doors, in group chats I wasn't part of, and in the absence of my name on the seating chart. That's when everything began to shift. And by the time I realized what was happening, I wasn't just being excluded, I was being erased. The first real crack appeared during a bridesmaid group text. Or rather, the fact that I wasn't in it. I found out about the dress fitting through a Facebook story, Sophie smiling in a boutique mirror, flanked by our cousin Jenna, and two of her friends from college. They all wore champagne-colored satin gowns. The caption read, "Final fitting with my favorite girls." I stared at it for 5 full minutes, blinking hard, trying to make sense of it. My phone never rang. No invite, no explanation, just silence. I called Sophie, trying not to sound hurt. She brushed it off. "Oh, it was last minute. Jenna offered to drive, and I didn't want to make a fuss. Don't worry, we'll get yours sorted separately." That's when it started sinking in. I wasn't just being overlooked, I was being distanced, intentionally. I knew my sister. When she wanted you involved, she made space for you. This felt like a shove toward the edge. Still, I gave her the benefit of the doubt. I thought maybe it's wedding stress. Maybe mom's just taking over like she always does. But the subtle slights kept stacking up like paper cuts. I wasn't included in the rehearsal dinner headcount. The hairstylist booking mysteriously didn't have time for one more appointment. I only found out the venue had changed because I happened to drive past the new location and saw the sign. And when I asked Mom, her words carved through me like ice. "You've always been so intense, Harper. This wedding needs peace, not tension." Peace I had paid for that venue. I had secured the down payment months ago with my name on the paperwork. I was the one who'd met with the vendor, negotiated the rates, and forwarded everything to Sophie. And now I was being treated like a liability. A guest. No less than a guest. Then came the final blow. I received a formal invitation in the mail. Not a phone call, not a text in envelope. Addressed not to maid of honor, not even to sister of the bride. Just Miss Harper Lane. With the words, "Kindly join us as we celebrate," printed in cold silver foil. I felt my stomach sink. They had replaced me, quietly, strategically, without confrontation. Like I was something to be removed before the pictures. I confronted my mother. I waited until she was alone at her garden club luncheon, knowing she'd try to keep up appearances. "Why wasn't I told?" I asked. Her eyes didn't flinch. "Because you always think everything has to revolve around you, Harper. This day isn't about you. It's Sophie's turn to shine. No apology, no ownership, just blame." That's when the betrayal became more than emotional, it became a war on memory. On all the moments I'd shown up, paid up, and shut up to keep the peace. They were rewriting the story, and in this version, I was too loud, too serious, too inconvenient. And maybe that's what made it worse. It wasn't just the exclusion, it was the erasure. They weren't asking me to step back. They were hoping I'd disappear. So I stopped explaining. I stopped asking. And I started watching. Every transaction, every receipt, every contract that had my name on it, I started collecting them. Quietly, methodically. If they wanted me out of the picture, I'd make sure they knew what it looked like when I really left. But this wasn't about revenge. Not yet. This was about clarity. And if you've ever been betrayed by your own family, silently, strategically, and with a smile on their face, I want you to know you are not alone. Drop a comment, share your story, and subscribe to this channel so we can grow together. Your support gives me the strength to keep speaking up. Let's build a place where the silenced finally get to speak. I didn't sleep the night I got that cold, silver-foiled invitation. I stared at it like it was a final notice, a silent eviction from the family I had built my life around. The house felt smaller, heavier. My chest ached in places I didn't know could hurt. I kept going over every sacrifice, every quiet yes I'd given them over the years, like a fool rehearsing a monologue for an audience that never cared. The worst part wasn't being excluded. It was realizing that they never intended to include me in the first place. I was always the placeholder, the utility, the one who made things work but never got the credit. The morning after I canceled the florist appointment I had arranged and paid for, the confirmation email was in my name, the deposit charged to my card. When Sophie's planner reached out, asking why the vendor hadn't shown, I simply replied, "Please refer to the new contract holder." "Oh, wait, you don't have one." That was the first domino. I didn't scream. I didn't threaten. I just started cutting strings, one invoice at a time. I withdrew the honeymoon gift. I had secured a 5-star beachfront resort I'd booked using my saved travel miles and personal connections. I had arranged champagne on a rival couple's massages, a sunset dinner cruise. All canceled. No explanation. I let the silence sting the way their exclusion had stung me. Then I contacted the wedding venue, the new one. It turned out that the contract hadn't yet been finalized. They were waiting on a payment. I emailed them proof that I had funded the original booking and asked them to hold any further agreements until the outstanding balance was addressed. Suddenly, Sophie and Mom were scrambling. They called, of course. First, Sophie. She left a flurry of voicemails alternating between confusion and guilt. Then came Mom, her voice tight and falsely sweet. "Harper, you're making things harder than they need to be. This is petty. You're better than this." That was rich coming from the woman who had replaced me with a cousin I barely speak to, who told people I had become too controlling and needed to be put in her place. If I was better than this, then maybe they should have been too. I didn't call back. I didn't explain. I just let them feel the consequences of treating someone like a burden when they'd been the backbone all along. Then the wedding shower happened, or tried to. I hadn't planned it, so it fell to Sophie's friends. They had no budget, no caterer, and no location. They ended up hosting it in a cramped living room with store-bought cupcakes and paper plates. Photos were scarce. Smiles were forced. That's when people started asking questions. Where was Harper? Didn't she always handle these things? Why wasn't she there? They didn't have answers because the truth was too ugly to say out loud. They had pushed away the only person who ever showed up. What no one knew, not even Sophie, was that I'd been recording. Not everything, just one conversation. The one where Mom told Aunt Lillian that Sophie was just a tool. Her words, Harper's so driven, so successful. Sophie gives us access to her money without all that attitude. I heard those words, and something inside me snapped into focus. It wasn't about the wedding. It never had been. It was about control. About using Sophie as the softer vessel to keep my resources flowing into a system where I had no say. I didn't send the recording yet. Not because I was scared, because I wanted them to keep digging the hole. I wanted them to feel secure before the ground gave out from underneath them. And they kept digging. Sophie posted a bridal countdown on social media, tagged everyone but me. My mother uploaded photos of her girls prepping favors. Not a single mention of me, though every satin ribbon, every monogrammed card, every table centerpiece had passed through my hands. I was no longer mourning my role in this family. I was dissecting it. And the deeper I looked, the more I realized this wasn't a recent betrayal. It was the climax of a pattern. They never saw me as a daughter or sister. I was an asset. And now that I had stopped giving, I had become disposable. But they had no idea that I still held the sharpest card of all. And I was done playing nice. The week before the wedding, Sophie finally showed up at my apartment. She stood at my door, holding a coffee cup, and a look that tried to blend innocence with apology, but I saw the panic behind her mascara. I didn't invite her in. I stood there in my doorway, arms crossed, waiting. She started rambling. I know you've been hurt, and I know Mom's said some things, but can we just forget all of it? It's my big day. Can't we just be a family again for one day? She had the audacity to act like all I needed was a little hug and a wedding favor to erase years of being used sidelined and silently erased, like I could just crawl back into the background and resume my role as the fixer with no voice. I didn't yell. I just looked her in the eyes and said, "You didn't forget me, Sophie. You replaced me." And I shut the door. That was the moment I felt something shift inside me. Not just resolve, but power. Real power. The kind that comes when you stop needing approval from people who never gave it freely. The kind that bubbles up when you've been pushed to the edge and finally decide to build your own ground beneath you. I spent the next day reviewing every document I'd signed, every contract, every receipt. I wasn't looking for revenge, I was organizing it. I forwarded a copy of the venue's unpaid balance to the owner, with a note, "There's a risk of financial misconduct tied to this event. You may want to verify the payment source." Then I canceled the custom print order for the ceremony program's ones I had designed and paid a deposit for. When the vendor called Sophie in a panic, I was already sipping tea on my balcony, listening to the chaos I didn't even need to orchestrate anymore. My silence was louder than any scream. The day of the wedding rehearsal, I sent out a simple email. It went to every vendor, every organizer, even a few mutual family friends. Attached was an audio file. The one where my mother reduced her daughters to pawns, praised Sophie for being manipulable, and called me too opinionated to control. The subject line, "For your awareness." I didn't stay to watch the aftermath unfold. I went to a lake house upstate that I had secretly purchased months ago. With my own savings, in my name only. I lit a fire, opened a bottle of wine, and let the phone buzz endlessly. My cousin called. Then another. Then Sophie. I didn't answer. Not because I was angry anymore, but because I finally understood the freedom of silence. Later that evening, I opened my inbox. A flood of replies. Some vendors dropped out. Some demanded immediate payment. A few family members sent vague, guilty messages asking if I was okay. But the most telling one came from my aunt, who simply wrote, "I wish I had done what you did years ago." That message hit me harder than I expected. Because it wasn't just about me anymore. This pattern of weaponized expectations of daughters being turned into silent servants wasn't new. It was generational. And I had broken it. I didn't attend the wedding. Instead, I sent a gift. A small box beautifully wrapped with a printed photo, inside one from Sophie's 10th birthday. We were sitting on the back porch cake on our faces, laughing like only sisters could. On the back, I wrote, "This is the last day I remember being your sister." No explanation, no closure, just truth. They made sure I wouldn't be part of their story. So I wrote my own. And this time, I wasn't handing them the pen. I thought the silence would last. That after everything I'd exposed, they'd back off. Maybe even reflect. But narcissists don't apologize, they double down. I was still at the lake house, sipping my morning coffee, when my phone buzzed with a notification from a private number. It was a message from my uncle, "Call me. It's about your mother." Against my better judgment, I did. His voice was low, nervous. "She's talking to a lawyer, Harper. Says you damaged the wedding and defamed the family. She's trying to sue." For a second, I laughed. It was so absurd it almost didn't feel real. The woman who had replaced me in my sister's life, stolen my labor, manipulated every family memory to make herself the center of the story, was now playing the victim because I had the audacity to expose the truth. But the laugh didn't last. Because then he added, "She's trying to use your childhood therapy records. She kept copies." My stomach dropped. That's when I realized this wasn't just a petty wedding squabble. This was war. My mother wasn't interested in peace or resolution. She was interested in punishment, in control, even if it meant weaponizing my pain, my past, my most vulnerable moments. I sat still for a long time, the mug warming my hands as the weight of it all settled in. And then something strange happened. I smiled. Because she had just made her biggest mistake. She thought I was still the daughter who needed her, still the girl who'd bend under guilt and fear. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I was a woman who had nothing left to lose, and that made me dangerous. I contacted my lawyer, not just to protect myself, but to prepare. I gathered every record, every receipt, every message that showed I had funded or organized parts of the wedding. Every message where I was excluded. Every voicemail begging me to fix their mistakes after I walked away. I even printed photos side by sides of Sophie's bridal shower and the one I threw for her college graduation. I compiled everything into a binder labeled "Proof I Was Never the Problem." Then I sent a cease and desist letter to my mother. With one sentence highlighted in bold, any attempt to defame, harass, or pursue litigation will result in a public countersuit and media exposure. Within 24 hours, the threats stopped, but something worse arrived in their place. A letter, handwritten, from Sophie. It started with fake sweetness. "I miss you. I wish we could talk." But by the third paragraph, her real tone bled through. "You always made things about you, Harper. Even when you were trying to help, you were controlling everything. Mom was right to step in. You just couldn't stand not being in the spotlight." There it was. The lie they'd all agreed to. The narrative they crafted together, like a bedtime story, one where I was the villain, and they were the victims. No mention of the years I paid off Sophie's student loans. No mention of the time I took a second job to help cover Mom's hospital bills. No mention of how many holidays I spent alone while they toasted without me, then sent leftover photos like scraps. But here's the part that hit hardest. "I don't need you in my life anymore. Not I'm hurt, not I'm confused. Just final, just clean." And maybe that's what they had always wanted. A clean slate one without the daughter who remembered too much, who didn't smile through the lies. I didn't cry when I read it. I just folded the letter, tucked it into my binder, and lit a fire in the wood stove. Some things deserve to burn, because that's the truth, isn't it? Sometimes the deepest betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from the people who teach you to smile while they cut you open. From the family who holds the knife with one hand and a camera with the other, documenting your breakdown as proof that they tried. But I wasn't breaking. I was just getting started. I thought the letter from Sophie would be the end, a final gut-wrenching period at the end of a very long, bloody sentence. But the thing about people like my mother, they don't stop when you walk away. They double back and light the path behind you on fire, just to make sure you know they're still in control. A week after I burned Sophie's words to ash, I got a call from the bank. Apparently, there was a request to review the joint investment account I'd once opened for family emergencies. I had almost forgotten about it. I opened it years ago when Mom's medical bills started piling up. It was supposed to be for anything unexpected: car trouble, prescription refills, rent if Sophie lost her job again. I had deposited $50,000 over time, quietly, without conditions. Because that's what family was supposed to do. The bank's fraud department flagged the activity because someone tried to change the authorized user without my consent. That someone, my mother. She forged my signature. And it almost worked. They had no idea I was still listed as the primary, and the alerts were set to my new email. If I hadn't gotten that call, if I hadn't acted in time, they would have drained every dollar I'd left behind for their safety net. My first instinct was to shake, to scream, to cry. But none of those feelings lasted longer than a minute, because that was the moment the final line was crossed. I wasn't just disrespected. I wasn't just erased. I was stolen from. That night, I sat at my desk and opened a new folder, Restitution. I went through every transaction I could find, every bill I'd paid, every asset that could be traced back to me. Flights, dresses, venues, gifts, deposits, canceled checks, and old messages confirming my payments. I wasn't just going to walk away this time. I was going to take something back. Not out of spite, but out of necessity. Justice, real justice, doesn't scream. It signs documents. And I had plenty. The next morning, I filed a small claim suit. Nothing flashy. Nothing public yet. Just enough to freeze their access to anything tied to my name. I also retained a forensic accountant. Because while they were busy erasing me from pictures, I had been documenting every dime. If they wanted war, I'd fight with paper precision and time. Then I made one more call. To a local journalist who specialized in family inheritance fraud. I didn't name names yet. I just asked what kind of evidence they usually needed to verify a story. He replied, enough to prove intent, history, and damage. I had all three. Still, I wasn't trying to ruin them. That's not what this was about anymore. It was about clarity, about making sure that if they ever tried to do this to another person, another daughter, another sister, they'd be known. Not just in private circles, but publicly. Not to humiliate them, but to protect the next version of me who doesn't yet realize she's being sacrificed for someone else's comfort. But here's the twist no one expected, not even me. While collecting the old files, I found an envelope in the back of my filing cabinet. Yellowing at the corners, unmarked, except for one line, written in my father's handwriting. For Harper, when you finally understand. My heart stopped. My father had died when I was 20. Heart failure, sudden, tragic, and quiet just like him. Inside was a letter. In it, he wrote about the toxic dynamic he'd witnessed between Mom and Sophie. How he'd seen them manipulate people to get what they wanted. How he'd worried even then that I would grow up giving more than I'd ever receive. You're strong, Harper, he wrote, but don't let them use your strength against you. Use it for yourself. I broke. Not out of sadness, but out of relief. Someone saw me. Someone believed me. Even if he hadn't lived long enough to say it aloud, he left it for me to find right when I needed it most. I framed that letter and hung it on the wall above my desk. Not as a decoration, but as armor. They tried to erase me. Now I was rewriting the legacy, word by word, line by line. And I wasn't done yet. The lawsuit didn't make the news, but the silence afterward did. No phone calls, no rage-filled voicemails, not even one of Sophie's signature sugar-coated apologies meant to buy more time. Just quiet, the kind that speaks louder than screams. I didn't need confirmation they received the legal notice. I knew they did. People like them don't disappear when they're innocent. They go into hiding when their illusion shatters. But I wasn't hiding anymore. I stood taller, breathed deeper, and looked in the mirror without flinching. For the first time in years, I wasn't bracing for the next betrayal. I was preparing for peace on my terms. The lake house, once a space that reeked of family ghosts, now smelled of lavender and fresh paint. I rebuilt it room by room. I left the guest room empty. Not out of pettiness, but out of purpose. Not everyone deserves a key to your healing. One afternoon, I received a message through the lawyer. It was from my mother. A single sentence. We didn't realize how much we hurt you. No apology. No accountability. Just damage control. I didn't reply. Because this story wasn't about their realization. It was about my reclamation. About how I turned betrayal into blueprint, pain into power, silence into strategy. And most importantly, how I finally chose myself. To anyone listening who's been written out of their own family story, who's had love held over their head like a leash, know this: you are allowed to let go. You are allowed to stop performing loyalty for people who wouldn't even notice your absence unless they needed something. You are not the villain for saying enough. And if this story moved you even a little, if Harper's truth echoed something inside your own, then help us grow this space for healing and strength. Drop a comment, share your story, and don't forget to subscribe so we can keep building a place where truth finally gets the mic. Because sometimes, the loudest revenge is living well and letting them watch in silence.